I'm going to stop sharing, I guess, when people first get in.
Yeah.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Give folks a minute to get connected. All right, so I just want to keep us on time. We only have 30 minutes here together, but I am thrilled to start us off for another session in our Love Data Week series. Today, we're joined by Dr. Debbie Zelizer. She is the chair of the Health Sciences Department in the School of Health Professions, and she's also chair of our faculty-led University Assessment Council. So today, she's going to be talking to us a little bit about reliable data, and I'll hand it over to you, Deb.
Good, thank you. Thank you. I have a brief PowerPoint. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, can everybody see that? Okay. So the title, in keeping with our Valentine's week, Falling in Love with Reliable Evidence, is easier than you think. So the first thing I want to kind of go over is the difference between program review and assessment. I've met with a lot of faculty, and I think sometimes there's a little confusion between the two of them. So every program, either department or program, is on a 7-year cycle of what we call an external review. The purpose is to ensure that your program is meeting the highest standards, and the hallmark of higher education is peer review. So the process is an in-depth self-study, and I just want to turn your attention to the bold. Program assessment, which is what we do annually on the other side of our screen, that data is part of the in-depth review. But things like job placements, the diversity, the credit hours, your applications, your admissions, your enrollment, your retention data, information about finances in your department or in your program, those are part of the program review. And the reviewers come on campus, or they do it via Zoom. They meet with a bunch of people. They meet with students, alumni, with the faculty. They read the document of the program review, and then they write, and they have a template, and they write down their impressions. They write suggestions. So that's the program review process. Let's turn our attention now to program assessment. And that's what we're here today to talk about. We're talking about evidence that you would use in annual program assessment. Let me just go through the process. 5-year cycle. So every degree program or certificate program must assess their program learning outcomes within a 5-year cycle. So if you have 5 program learning outcomes, I do in my department, I would assess one with my faculty and staff annually, so that at the end of that 5-year cycle, I've assessed all of the program learning outcomes. Most programs have between 4 and 5. Some have more, some have less. So you just have to assess all of them within that 5-year cycle. What we look at, as opposed to this in-depth reflection on all of these topics, the committee looks at your program goals, your learning objectives, your curriculum mapping. That means where are you collecting data from, the type of data, your benchmarks, your analysis, your reporting, and closing the loop. So if any of this language is new to people, I have a couple of slides that we're going to go through. I'm going to give examples each step of the way. And then the assessment coordinators, each one of your programs have an assessment coordinator. They lead this process, but this process isn't only done by the assessment coordinator. It should be including all the faculty and staff in the department to sort of look at what we're doing, how we're doing it. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay. So data. What is data? Just like in research, right? If we have garbage data coming in, If we're collecting garbage data, our results will be meaningless. So we need to decide as a faculty or as a program, however you do it in your area, is that what's the best data that we can collect that's doable. It has to be doable because it's something we're doing annually that is doable and will give us some very good information about our program learning outcome. I would say that this is very flexible. In my department, because we have such a large major, so many students, that we select assignments, exams, portfolios, etc., that we're already using in a course that the faculty members grading, and then we just pull that data out of Brightspace, right out of the grade book. So that works for us. I've known other faculty that said, I really want to measure if students are improving. So they do a pre-test and a post-test at the end of their course. This data can be anything that you kind of want it to be that will give you something meaningful to see if students are learning. Now, what's not assessment data is the final course grade, right? 80% of my students in this class passed the course with a grade of C or better, right? That's not assessment data. And we're gonna kind of go a little deeper into why. But I just want to stop for a second. Does anybody have a question about what I've said so far? So raise your hand, just unmute yourself, ask a question. Okay. So this is an example. Oh, good. I'm putting people here on the bottom so I can see. Process to assess learning outcomes. The first thing you do is what course or courses are aligned with that program learning outcome. So you don't have to assess every single course in your curriculum. You select a course that has content that is directly aligned with that learning outcome. You select your data. You set a level of performance. In my major, I expect 80% of my senior year students to earn the grade of 73 or higher on this assignment. Or in my major, the rationale comes in why I'm setting this benchmark. There are some things that are really important, and 100% of the students should get it right. Radiation safety or HIPAA. If they're going into healthcare, those are things where you can't make mistakes. So you set your benchmark based on your learning objective and your goal and what you and your faculty and department believe is the best benchmark. What level of performance do I want for this specific learning outcome? And the analysis, and this is the goal of all assessment, is to identify the weaknesses and the strengths in student learning. We want to constantly be looking at how can we do our jobs better? How can we improve student learning? And if we identify, this assignment and my students didn't reach the benchmark I expected, what action steps or changes will improve student learning? Now, I want to just give an example about this. How and I got this from Paul Bingham, he's a bio professor. What I tell my students is, and what I tell my faculty when we talk about this, is that I teach a research class, is that we fail our way to new knowledge. That's what science is all about. We fail our way. When we make a hypothesis, we collect data, we analyze the data, and then we accept or we reject our hypothesis. If we reject our hypothesis, that's important because now we know move to a different set of hypotheses. So that's what actions to the curriculum to improve student learning are about, right? Oh, my students didn't perform well. I'm going to make this change, and I want to see if this change improves student learning. So it's not about faculty being a good teacher, a bad teacher, or, you know, used for your reappointment or used for your promotion. It should be about seeing continuous improvement in your ability to be a teacher. And that's a really positive thing. So here's an example of putting it all together that comes out of my department. So one of our PLOs, because we're a healthcare major, we believe that upon completion of the degree, students should be able to work collaboratively in diverse teams. So that's our learning outcome. In our senior year curriculum, every course in the fall, 5 courses, all have group work where students have to work on a poster, an assignment, a presentation. But we decided that there was one course we were going to pull the data from, because I don't want to pull it from all 5 of my class. That would be too much. So we have a communications class where students spend the semester working on a group presentation. This is where we collect. So this is the evidence. This is where we're collecting it. This is what we're collecting. The instructor grades the group presentation on synergy. Did they structure their presentation in a way that makes sense? Do they introduce the next topic? So, you know, we give them a rubric, of course, but the instructor grades, does this look like a professional presentation where everyone was involved in the content and that it flows? So we pull that data. We also have the peers, each member of the group, evaluate their teammates to see how well they worked. Were they collaborative, working in a group team? We set the benchmark that 90% of our students will earn the grade of B or higher. That's our benchmark. That's where we want students to be performing. And then we average the grades for group synergy, and we average these grades. We decided as a department it would be really beneficial and more robust data if we had the students' perceptions of how they work together and the instructor's graded assessment. So we average the grades and we come up with, 2 things. Benchmark met, no need to change. We don't need any improvements. Or we didn't meet the benchmark, and then we get together as a faculty and staff and we say, what do we need to do to increase? There's a barrier. We want to increase student learning in this area. Any questions about this assignment? And I just have my assistant. I'm chair of a department, so I'm lucky enough to have an assistant. I have my assistant just pull this data down from Brightspace. So we have the data, we put it into a folder in the Google Drive, and then I assign a faculty member to analyze the data. We present it at a retreat. All the faculty, agree or give comments, and that's how we annually assess a learning outcome. Now, it's really important to look at your program learning outcome, to work collaboratively in a diverse team. Let's take a look at another learning outcome I have in my program that's much more complex. I have 9 different concentrations of study in my major. So I annually assess one of them, but within a 7-year cycle, I've assessed all of them. So let's say I'm picking exercise science concentration. Here's the PLO. We have to have students integrate and apply knowledge, skills, competencies, ethical and professional values. So our evidence now has to really match that PLO. So I can only select graded work in the courses that students take in the exercise science concentration that requires students to integrate and apply knowledge, skills, competencies, ethics, and values. So this is my mapping to the course and where we're collecting data. So we assessed knowledge in a entry-level course, final project, in this course's final project, and then quizzes 1 through 3 in this course. We believed by crossing courses in the concentration and pulling something out, that would give us some very good evidence to see our students, I just want to go back, integrating and applying knowledge. Now the same thing with skills, right? So we pull for skills, we mostly pulled the lab courses, one assignment from each one of these lab courses. And I asked the faculty, what's the best assignment? And so she picked the assignments that the year before the grades were lower in, because we really wanted to take a look at what was going on with those specific assignments, and was there a way with our evidence, our analysis of our evidence, that we could improve. Competencies are putting knowledge and skills together to do something. So this is sort of our capstone project in that concentration, developing an emergency action plan, which pulls from, you need content and skills from each one of these courses to be competent. And then ethical or professional values, we selected from this course, professional interview, where they had to go and find a professional that was working in the field of exercise science, interview them with specific questions that would get to professional values and ethics. I'm going to stop here for a second. Questions, comments, discussions. What do you think about the evidence that I pulled? Okay, so I'm a professor, so should I do random calling? Is anything unclear? Does anybody want to debate with me that maybe that wasn't the best evidence? I know Sue Ryan's always up for a question. Go ahead, Sue.
No, I'm not, it's not necessarily a question. It's just that, it's a lot of information that's really good that you presented. And so what's happening in my mind is I'm processing it. And I'm also comparing it to what I do.
Right.
And I don't know that I drill down as far. So like one of my takeaways is kind of like the concept of start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And think, where am I going to go? And then backtrack from there to be more thorough with what it is that I'm trying to, because I'm going to go through a program review. So that was really helpful to me, that first part of the slide. But I think it shows to me, I don't know that I've ever seen an example of everything in action. And so having that as an example is really valuable.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again, and I want to get to my last slide. So I would love to work with you one-on-one to help you fall in love with assessment data. We started in our department, so I know these slides will be sent out to you. Please send me an email with days and times that you can meet, and I would love to just do the same thing that I did, that I shared with you in my department, and to kind of work through the process with you. I have to say, where we started, we did a lot of failing in the beginning. A lot of failing. We started in 2013, really focusing on assessment, and there's a huge learning curve. If you have one takeaway from this is, and I loved how you phrased it, Sue, start with the end. What do you want students to be able to do? That's your program learning outcome. Where in my curriculum, and you can start with picking one place if you teach it in multiple places. Where in my curriculum do I teach that? Where in my curriculum do I grade that? The thing that you grade, that's your assessment, that's your evidence. You pull that data and then you spend time analyzing it with a benchmark, with setting a benchmark, right? So if anyone is struggling with setting a benchmark, if anyone's struggling with what's the best data, and I've been doing this for a while. In the beginning, we were like, oh, everybody got 100 on something that we thought, like 80% should get a C. Okay, maybe that, and we did the reverse. Maybe that assignment's too easy. Maybe we're not challenging students enough, right? So and it's also about making small incremental changes to your teaching, to your curriculum. Thank you, Sue. We still have a couple of minutes. Anyone else have a comment?
So I have a question. I heard you mention earlier a benchmark of 73 on a certain assignment. And I know sometimes in our assessment groups, we talk about how people come to those numbers. So I was just curious about your process. Was it based on like an industry standard, an average from prior results? How'd you get there?
So here's my answer. I am in progress with this. I am not perfect, right? Progress over perfection. We really struggled with setting benchmarks. So what we did was we set the lowest benchmark that we could in the beginning, and then we see how well students did, and then we increased our benchmark. And then we said, for example, my rationale. For certain embedded exam questions, I'm comfortable with a lower benchmark because not all students do well on exams. So that's our rationale. But we really should see close to 80%, 90% with a 73 or better. That's a C. That's our passing standard of embedded questions. Another benchmark, we would set it higher for, working in collaborative teams. Since we do that across all 5 of our core courses that all 504 seniors took this fall, we want to set a higher benchmark because there's many more opportunities for people to practice. So then we set that benchmark higher. And I know that some programs are very rigorous with their benchmarks and some programs are less rigorous with their benchmarks. And I think that it's a learning process and that people shouldn't be afraid to try something and fail. There was one, when we first started this in 2013, there was one assignment that we couldn't even get to 40% of the students reaching a 73. And we were like, wow, this is really like startling, which we thought was a concept that every student would grab. It took us 3 attempts to reach our benchmark. We corrected one assignment, we analyzed it the next year, same performance. We were mystified, right? Then we went to another thing. Then what we did for our evidence is we just took a group of students after they had finished that class and we said, what's the confusion between these 2 concepts? That helped us. Then we drew a diagram and we were at our benchmark. So please don't be afraid to fail. And some of your, as Krista just said, some of your industries have certain standards. So play with your benchmarks. But have it be thoughtful. Don't have to be, oh, I saw somebody else's benchmark was 70% of the students would get the grade of C in this assignment. It needs to be thoughtful for your department. How is it going to move your curriculum forward?
I have a related question at benchmarks. So when do you decide to lower your benchmark? Right. So for example, a couple of tries, right? You fix things and then let's do it again and see if you're going to get the, I don't know, performance up. But then you still don't see, like when it's the time you're gonna say, oh, okay, maybe we should lower it?
Okay, and I think that's a really good question. I think that's an individual question. Some, I've been doing this for a while and talking with colleagues. I think some colleagues set their benchmarks so high that they lowered them. We in my department started our benchmarks very low to see where we were. Like, we were new to this back in 2013. So we set them low and we said, well, every student has to repeat this course if they don't get a C. Let's take an important assignment and see, are they meeting that basic level? And then we moved our benchmarks up from there. So I think that's a discussion with the faculty about why this benchmark, what do we expect, and where are you pulling it out in your curriculum? Sort of like the SBCs, right? Is it an intro course and students are so new to the topic? I would set the benchmark a little lower. Is it your capstone course after they've completed your entire program and you're assessing a competency? I would set that benchmark higher. So I think that's an individual discussion. And I still struggle with benchmarks. Evidence and the data makes sense to me. It's got to be something that's doable, something that faculty are already grading, so I'm not putting a burden on my faculty, and something that makes sense for that PLO. I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form, but thank you for your question, Ling. Anyone else? I know we have about 3 more minutes. Okay, one last question. Have you fallen in love with evidence yet?
I have one. Really, how do you keep motivated when you're going through that process of failing to succeed? Like, how do you keep your faculty motivated so they're not fearful, that they don't feel as though they're doing something wrong? Like, how do you keep that motivation going?
Good. So I'm fortunate enough to be chair of the department and program director of the major. So I've started instilling in my faculty that we're going to fail our way through this. I'm not the expert. Maybe this is not going to work. Let's try it. And whenever it's something new, like I'm assessing a new initiative in my department, a place where I know we as faculty are not doing well. It's a national issue, but I know that we're not doing well. So I always use my course first as the thing and show people how terribly, miserably I'm failing at this benchmark, right? And if it's okay for me to fail and to get input from my faculty, it's okay for the faculty to fail. And when my faculty will mock me about this, so now you can mock me. I hope we're not being recorded for this part. But during faculty meetings where somebody identifies something that didn't work, I jump up and scream, assessment gold. Yay, I'm so excited. Wow, that's great, because that's really what it's about. Let's identify our weaknesses so we can be better. Let's identify what we're doing well, right? I know we're doing well, but where can we improve? So I think it's a culture. I think it's a departmental culture and feeling comfortable enough to say that you failed. And I always use myself as an example first.
Debbie, I want to tell you a 10-second story about Smith College.
All right.
They were having issues with student wellness, where students were getting a A- or a B+ and going to the health center with anxiety. And so they contacted faculty, deans, provosts, and they had pictures, literal pictures and billboards up saying, I'm the dean of whatever business school, and I failed out of community college before I got this job, or I'm the dean of the chemistry department, and I failed both chemistry courses my first year of college. And they championed that.
Yeah.
So the students would see it and get away from this lens of that they had to be perfect. And it was deemed a success at the school.
Good. Thank you, Sue. Yes, yes, it's a culture. When did not being, first of all, we can never be perfect. We can only be learning. But when did it become taboo to fail? Like, right? As researchers, we fail our way to new knowledge. Why wouldn't we apply that same concept to assessment?
All right, we're at time, so I just want to respect everyone's schedules, but thank you so much, Deb, for such a great presentation, and we hope we see you all at more Love Data Week sessions.
And really, I mean, feel free to contact me, and I would be willing to just meet privately, you know, doesn't have to go anywhere else, just privately to talk about your struggles and successes with assessment.
Thank you.
Bye.